podcast. Today we are joined by Emmy-nominated and Raindance Award-winning television director and producer Michael Morris. His works include Better Call Saul, 13 Reasons Why, Bloodline, Brothers and Sisters, and his feature-length film To Leslie. Welcome, Mr. Morris. Excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, to start, obviously us as cinematic arts students definitely have our different practices as we go from set to set. So I was wondering, do you have any rituals or exercises you participate in before, during, or after production to keep you grounded and in there?
That's an excellent question. I would say I do, actually. I can think of two things that I found really, really helpful. And your word grounded is very important because oftentimes in this job, you're racing from place to place and you're racing to get there and you're racing against the light or you're racing against other obstacles. And the thing that is the enemy of any real authentic moment, I think, is that sense of rush and panic. Definitely. So part of our job, any director's job, I think, is to find like a way to stop that tidal wave of everything else getting in the way of the set and protecting that moment when the actors are going to hopefully find something true. So how do we do that? Speaking for myself, the first thing, and this is a lesson I hope you never have to learn if anyone who's listening is a director, is don't be late. Right? Mm-hmm. That happened to me one time in Los Angeles because the traffic was I think it was a car accident or something, and I showed up late. I showed up at 5. It wasn't very late, 7 minutes. Oh, it was the worst feeling of my life. It was the worst feeling of my life. And I think up until then I hadn't realized that you really have to lead by example. You really have to be a standard bearer for like what this production is going to be like. So from that day on, it was a long time ago, I'm always an hour ahead of time. So that's my first ritual, is to get there I get there an hour before call. And it's helpful in so many ways. You get to stand on the set before anyone's there. You get to sort of actually imagine what that scene might look like and feel like in real life without the craziness and people crossing and ladders coming in. And that I've now found is the fundamental for me. And some of my best ideas, I thought I had all my ideas. And then you get to the set an hour early and you go, oh, okay, it's a real place. I might actually do this instead. So that's one. And the second thing is shot list. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use all your shots. It doesn't even mean that the shots that you're going to write down are the best shots. So my big asterisk on this is come with a list of shots that can make your day, can tell the story the way that you can imagine it being told. Mm-hmm. But don't direct from a shot list. So the shot list for me is a ritual now because it's a way for me to engage with a script that I've probably read 200 times and know backwards. But once you break it down into, I'm going to need obviously I'm going to need a 2-shot of these guys, and there's a moment in the middle where somebody lies, right? So maybe I'm going to want a special shot or a three-quarter angle on their eyes or a close-up or whatever it is that I want. Once you've written it down, there it is. You can do it if you want. But it's also a way for me to actually take the story apart again in questioning what shots you need. Do I need it to be, maybe I want that lie, maybe it's more interesting if that lie the character's telling is not to mark it at all. Just do it in a big wide shot. And asking yourselves those very practical questions, even the day before you shoot, even though you think you know it, that's a very important ritual for me too.
Thanks. So kind of jumping off of that, on the topic of shot lists, to what extent do you have to stay to your shot list then, and at any moment, if you want to change it because of some inspiration you had at the last moment, when do you have to pull yourself back if it maybe causes any conflict with any of your other crew mates?
That's a really smart question, because obviously what we try and do is prepare for the day. We try not to improvise the day too much. So in some basic ways, I think most of the shots that we're going to make in narrative storytelling are going to be the ones we would expect. How we do it, we hope we're going to find interesting ways to tell the story visually. But the general framework we'll probably have. I think that what I mean by being flexible with the shot list is being open to to what happens on the day. Because the one problem with a shot list, and why some directors, even myself at the beginning of my directing career, were suspicious of them, is that they don't take into account the actors. They don't take into account the moments. They don't take into account rehearsal. They don't, you know what I mean? They're great academically. They're great. So I would argue that's true, but that's why we don't direct from our shot lists. Like, we have them because it gives us a familiarity with all of the corners of these particular scenes. But I think it can be to answer your question, it can be problematic if you come on the day and you say, hey, we're not going to do the dolly shot, we're going to do a techno crane shot. And they're like, that's great, we don't have a crane because you didn't ask for one, you know. So we have to be careful. But if say I said to myself, bad example maybe, but, oh, this is a really interesting moment, I'm going to do a slow push in here. And that's on my shot list. It absolutely might be, and it's happened many times, that in rehearsal, that's 100% wrong. That would just be the wrong way to tell that story. So that's what I mean. Don't let the shot list let you not be open to what the actors are telling you or what the scene is telling you.
For sure. And I think that's really important, especially for students like us, because like on our own sets, we are always like super attached to our shot list, as well as not very aware of our actors and the possible different things that could happen on sets with the talent that's around us. So many times we start making our films and we're saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And not only do some of us as high schoolers even forget to take care of our actors, but at times we're also forgetful that our actors bring a whole nother layer of complexity and talent to the table that we can't always foresee. So I think that's really important. So thank you. I know you were talking earlier about the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles, but you actually started out over in the UK. So I heard that you were talking about theater in the UK and how you started there. I was wondering how your knowledge in theater has helped your directing here in the States.
Yeah, I started out as a theater director from quite a young age, all through school, really. As far as I remember, we were doing plays and bringing them up to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and just doing our best to get them seen. I think there's obviously big differences in the way that, in what's asked of you as a director and of an actor, or as a piece, as a theatre piece, right? For a start, this is a one-take special theatre. You know, once it begins, it keeps going. So what you have to do in your weeks of rehearsal is you have to find a way to ingrain all of the important movements of the play, so that you can then sort of open the door and let it go. Whereas on film is in some ways the absolute opposite, right? On film, we're working scene to scene, oftentimes moment to moment. We're shooting out of order. We're, even within a scene, once you get to the editing room, you learn very quickly that, oh, I just need, I need a close up of someone reacting, and you could take that reaction from a completely different moment, and it doesn't disturb. In fact, it helps the flow. So they're very different in some ways. I think for me, where it's really helped me is. You spend an awful lot of time in a theatrical rehearsal room figuring out motivations and why people are doing things. Why, like, you treat the play, I think, in some, like, the text is sacred in a play. Not always the case on movie sets, but the text is sacred in a play. So what you do, the questions you ask are more along the lines of, with the information that we have, which is he says this, she says that, they go there, they do this. How do you get there? How do you fill in those gaps? You, as an actor and as a director, you have to go to the text, and it might take a while. You might say, no one would ever do this and this. That would never happen. And then after about a week of like wrangling, you go, unless they were, oh, maybe they're crazy, or maybe she's in love with him. I never thought of that. You know what I mean? And you fill in the gaps, and it helps you get to a place. And that, to me, is like my biggest takeaway from working in theater. And if we can find a way to concentrate that whole process as quickly as we can, and the actors and the director and sometimes the writer, if they're there, work together to say, before we say it doesn't work, like, how can it work? Like, how could it work? Maybe that's more interesting. Maybe it's more interesting to do something unexpected. And that's helped, I think, me a lot.
Totally. So on the topic of British entertainment, I was wondering, in your perspective, What's better, British entertainment or American entertainment?
This is really difficult for me because I grew up in Britain, and now I make American entertainment. So I think no, I can't. American entertainment.
Okay. Okay.
Good. We'll go with that.
For sure. For sure. So, going into your specific shows, with shows like Better Call Saul, did you ever feel placed in a creative box and forced to conform to the style of previous episodes? Because that can definitely be a challenge when you're not starting all the way from the beginning, but you have to work off previous episodes made by different directors. So, how does your direction differ under those circumstances?
That's a very it's a really smart question, because I'm sure that you can feel that way, and I'm sure I have felt that way on other projects. On Better Call Saul specifically, I have never felt that way, because I feel more. It's more that I feel that I'm in a line of really, really talented people, and I'm very. You feel honored, honestly. You know what it is? It's a little bit like. There's a baseball analogy here. It's like growing up watching your favorite baseball team, and then being picked to be a starting pitcher. It's, you're with a group of others, right? You don't pitch every game, but you're really keenly aware of all the brilliant people who have done what you do beforehand, and you want to do well every time. So, and the genius of that show specifically, and I'm sure that there are many others, but that one specifically, is that they encourage you to make film. They encourage you to make choices. They applaud you when you say, this might sound crazy, but what if, so you never feel in that creative box you're talking about. I think that a creative box for me would be a show without a specific style, because then I'd be, what's the point?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Cool. So, on the topic of qualities and qualities of a film director, what qualities do you have to restrain when wearing a producer hat? Because I know you've also been producer in many different films. So how do you find that balance between being a producer and being a director? And do you ever have to focus on one?
Yes. I'm thinking about a good way to answer it. I mean, I think there are so many different types of producers, and I don't just mean personality types and the way they approach their job. There are literally, the word means 100 things. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes in television, a producer is a writer. An executive producer is a head writer. Oftentimes in film, producers can be financiers, or they can be studio or distributors, or, so the fact of being a producer doesn't actually determine what it is that you're doing. They all do important things. Critical things, but they're different. In my experience, being a producer as well as a director, being a producer is usually second in my mind to being a director. Mm-hmm. What it means is that I get to stay with the show even when I'm not directing. And so then the question is, well, what are you doing if you're not directing? And I think it's all it is to me is being a resource for the people there, whether it's writers, actors, or visiting directors, as a sort of almost, I mean, I hate to say it, it's almost like what we used to call in theatre an artistic director, meaning they don't direct every play, the artistic director, but they are there to sort of help the tone, help everything feel like it's knitting together in the right way, and to be there in case something needs help, in case there's an issue. Sometimes it's as practical as, we couldn't get everything shot, we need to shoot 3 more scenes on Friday. I'm there for that. But oftentimes it's more like, let's discuss the scenes the way that I and the show might like to look at them, and then hand it over to the director. So the director doesn't feel as alone in the process, parachuting into a country they don't know. So in that way, I feel like it's directing, but just sort of more behind the scenes.
Totally. So from that management and that directorial perspective, what is your process of interpreting a script and executing it, especially as the director? Like, walk us through your pre-production, post-production processes in that sense.
So for me, I studied literature, which was my introduction to, that was just what I studied at university. So I found, and I think in comparison with some other directors, I approach it as a text first. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that. Believe me, I'm just sort of answering it, for myself, because you could absolutely have gone to film school and approach it visually first. I mean, that's 100% valid. But for me, I tend to approach it as a text, meaning let me try and. Okay, step one. I'll start there. Step one, very important to me, is allow yourself the space to read the script. Because that experience that you get reading the script for the first time is precious. You can't ever do it again. And it's intimately related to the feeling that you're trying to inspire in an audience the first time they see it. So unless you can actually audit like what that is, and it's going to be much harder to achieve it. So what that means is read it in one sitting, if you possibly can. Read it without a phone, read it without email or internet. Just be there. Don't obsess over taking notes. I'm a big note taker, but I try and put that away when I'm first reading it. Even if I forget something, it drives me crazy. It's more important to get to the end of the script and go, oh my God, I'm moved by it, or I'm not moved by it. Like, what happened? You have to know. That's the first thing. Then I get into a quite intense breakdown of every scene. If I know it's going ahead, I will rewrite. Basically, essentially, what this is, I suppose, is rewriting the movie in my own words, but not in dialogue. So I'll do a slug line at the top, and then I'll say, it'll be like half scene description and half sort of what's going on in the scene. So the scene description, two people go out for a cup of coffee. So then I'll remember that that's the scene where they're getting coffee. But actually what's happening is, one of them is saying, I want a divorce. And so you'll start to sort of beat that out. And if you look at my notebooks, it's a lot of writing. It doesn't look like filmmaking. It's just like a lot of writing. But it's really helpful for me because I've now broken down the script in a way that I can sort through. And my next pass, and sometimes it happens at the same time, is all visual. Then it's like we're going through, and does one shot really stand out to me? In the movie that I just made, there were two shots that I knew right from the moment I read it that I wanted to do. So I draw those in the margin, and I'll start to, and that will imply something else. Okay, now we're sort of figuring out like what the language of the film language is going to be. Are we handheld? Are we on the dollies? Are we both? Are we steady cam? That's different, and so I will start to, I guess, now see the movie a bit more. And as soon as I see something, I draw it out very badly, but I draw it out in storyboards so that I know that I can come back. And they are always fluid. They will always change. But I guess that's the process, and it helps to do that early so that when you're scouting locations even, you have an idea. It's just practically helpful if you know you want a dolly move. You're going to need more space in the room than if you are going to be handheld, So it's good to get that done as early in the process as you can so that you can make informed choices.
Cool. So step one, read the script freely.
Read the script. Don't forget. People forget. They go like, yeah, I read the script, but what they mean is they read it in 4 sessions, while eating a sandwich. I mean, really respect it. Respect that.
Yeah. So if we read the script freely, we break it down as if we're rewriting it, and then visualize it, we should be good.
You'll be fine.
Cool. So that sounds good. I'll keep that to mind. So now, in terms of working with your crew, how do you communicate with your crew to ensure the best product?
It's really important that, first of all, the word communication is pretty much at the heart of what we do. Whether it's communicating with an actor, or communicating with a writer, or communicating with a department head, anything. That's what we do. That's our stock in trade. The crew it's very specific. There's a lot of times you'll see an analogy of like, what does the director do? Well, they're like a conductor, right? They're not playing the instruments, and I think in some senses that can be true. But you have to then realize that the crew are the orchestra. That's what the crew are. They make it. You can't make a movie. As a director, you can if you're a camera person. You can if but you can't as a director. And another way to say it, I suppose, is the unit of a song might be a chord. The unit of a poem might be a line. The unit of a novel is a sentence. The unit of a movie is a shot. That's you have to sort of approach the shot before you can make a cool scene. Before you can make a cool movie.
Totally.
But imagine if you had to write a novel with 100 people collaborating on each sentence, right? You really need to have some direction. So the most important thing is come in having done your homework. I know that everyone listening to this will, but I'm going to say it anyway because you would be amazed at how many directors out there start to get lazy and start to go, well, the crew knows how to make this shot. The crew knows kind of what's going on. Yes, they do. They're brilliant filmmakers, but that's not the point. The point is they need an author on the day. That's how the day is structured. So really do your work and respect the work. Respect the crew. Learn their names. Learn what they do. You know what I mean? Like, I know that sounds really basic, and I'm telling you this because I've seen a lot. Don't take anything for granted. Don't take for granted that they know what you want. You have to communicate it. I would say practically, try and direct from the floor of the scene as much as you can. That doesn't mean you're not going to sometimes want to be back with the monitors but do it there because then you'll see what they're up against. Sometimes I watch Dolly Grip's work and I'm amazed by the artistry that they have to get the camera exactly. And when you're there working with them and they see that you're there, I'm talking about Dolly Grips, but I mean the same for boom ops. I mean the same for everybody who's doing this, camera operators. When they see that you're part of the process and not just part of the kind of the fun stuff of like saying that was great, cut. Then I think there's you understand that it's a collaboration, and you're not going to yell from the back, "Hey, can you go faster, please, on that dolly?" If you know what that person is like climbing over a table in order to push that dolly, and without shaking the camera. So you have to participate, I guess, is the word that I'm looking for. And I think the last thing I would say, there's lots more to say, but I would say is, and it goes with my shot list advice, is be prepared to listen. Listen to your crew. I guarantee you that your camera operator has a different relationship to the scene than you do, even if you wrote it. I don't care if you wrote it and you're directing it. The person holding the camera is inches away from the actor, is feeling what's happening in that scene. And if they're doing their job well, will not change the shot unless you want them to. But if they come to you, which a lot of really good operators will do, and say, I think we want to be closer, or I think we want to come around listen. It may not be the shot you had in mind, but listen, and if you have any opportunity and you trust them, try it. Because that's how you build trust, I think.
Totally. So far we've been talking mostly about TV. But as we near our end, I was wondering what convinced you to direct a feature into Leslie, which you just directed recently. Do you see yourself moving towards more features going forward, or sticking with TV?
I think I'd wanted to direct a feature for a long time. There's something... I think the reason I fell in love with this medium and wanted to give my life to try and do it, basically, was ultimately from movies. That's where it began. We're very lucky to live in a time when there are fabulous shows like Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and 1,000 others. It's incredible now what's happening. I'm very proud and lucky to be part of it in the extent that I am. But I think it was important for me to do a feature because that's what made me fall in love with film.
For sure.
So, yes, the answer is I'd love to do more. It took me an awful long time to find a story and a mode of storytelling that I believed in enough to really commit to doing. So I hope that I can either write or find something else soon. Yeah, it'd be great.
For all our listeners, I would highly recommend seeing To Leslie. It just came out this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah.
So check that out. It can be watched on...
Everywhere you get them. You could rent it right now as of publication, as they say. It's on Apple. You can rent it. You can buy it. It's on Amazon. You can rent it anywhere you'd look. It's just not available for free, unfortunately, not yet.
Well, I'm sure it's worth the money. So please check it out. So now, to end our interview session, we ask every guest this question before ending our interview. But if you could go back in time and give your teenage self a piece of advice, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, brilliant. I want to hear everyone's answer. That's the problem, is I think it would be connected to... I think what I didn't... Okay, I need to explain my answer before I answer. I think what I didn't understand... I didn't have any patience, I think. I think I was lacking in patience. And I think a lot of us are like that, to be honest, especially in the arts, because... the arts are so uncertain anyway. Like when anyone who's listening to this is probably not in the business of getting a 9-to-5 job and having security. So I think a lot of us, it's scary, and therefore you want it all now. So I think for me, I would have said, slow down a bit, give yourself the space that you need to have ideas and to develop ideas. Anything creative, I now am beginning to realize more and more, you need to give yourself space and time, because otherwise you're going to deal with your surface ideas, and your surface ideas might be really good, but if you give a little more space and time, you can get beneath those, question them, and you might come up with something better. So I think that I would say, have patience. Don't panic that about time. Time will pass, but it doesn't mean that nothing's happening, because this is where ideas are born.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Morris. This was amazing. And to all our listeners, until next time.